Public remarks. If you'd like to make a public remark after I acknowledge you, please come to the microphone and give your name and address so we can get it recorded in the minutes correctly. Okay, Donna.
Donna Schrader, Lordstown, Ohio. I wanted to talk about the trains from last week. I know I contacted the police department and different things. There was 4 times last week that the trains had Highland Avenue completely blocked. The first 2 times I have no information about. The one last Thursday, it was blocked for an hour and 25 minutes. Would move a little bit and then back up. Then it didn't move for a long time. It was 155 cars on that train. The engine that was pulling it wasn't a good one, it wasn't a new one. And guys from the railroad came up the road and talked to me and said that there was something wrong with the first engine. They were taking some kind of a piece up there, and then after that they would get the train going. Well, the train took over almost 25 minutes to clear the tracks after it got going. Friday's train was down 2 hours and 15 minutes. So that makes a total of 3 hours and 40 minutes that train had Highland Avenue blocked on those 2 days. And I don't know what they had it blocked on the other 2. Usually nobody knows that that's even happening. If you have an ambulance, if you have a fire truck, they're not going to get through. They come up there and the people are mad and they turn around in my yard, and I don't appreciate it, and that's why I am up here. Is there anybody I can contact as a homeowner to do anything about this situation? Because the second train on Friday was the same type of train and had the same 2 engines on it. So whatever they're doing, they told me Friday's train had brake problems. They couldn't build up to get the brakes going. Is there anybody I can contact? Because I will pursue this.
Donna, I will tell you, we as a village, we've had Mr. Dutton involved with it. I'll turn it over to Brent or Paul here in a couple minutes. This is under federal guidelines. I remember years ago, the first police chief, Malcolm, used to cite them. And they'd go to court all the time when they were blocking the tracks, especially here on 45 before they got the bridge. We've had Capri Cafaro involved. We've had Tim Ryan's office involved. We've had, and we've all been trying to work. I think everybody up here is aware. We have a bigger problem down there by Muth Road. And
it's like they're moving that problem up a little further and just tying all of Lordstown up now, and that's not right.
The only thing they've told us, and all that, Brent and I had a discussion about that just today. If we had an emergency or something like that, they said they would break the train, split it there so we could get the cars through. Now, and I know that's not what you want to hear, but we've been fighting this for 15, 20 years.
Take too? That person up on the other side or that house on the other side can die or be destroyed. And it's not a good situation for this village.
Well, we agree. Brent, you have any comments on that?
No, everything Mrs. Schrader said is true. We were given the same information by CSX when we called. The second day they had braking issues. We received a number of calls, a number of complaints. But I will also say what the mayor said is accurate as well. They have informed us that if we have an emergency, and they define an emergency as a police, fire, EMS. They don't define an emergency as an inconvenience to our residents. And I don't think it's right either. It's very frustrating. It's very frustrating for our school system. Our buses have been held up. They don't define that as an emergency. They define an emergency as life, and that has to do with police, fire, and EMS. And they've assured us that if we have a true emergency, we have a specific number that we are to call, and they will break the train. To answer your question as far as how long that would take, I can tell you if I was on one side of the train in a police car, I would go around and probably beat the brake. Right. But I can't answer you to how long that will take.
I know. I've talked to you about it before, and this is frustrating, but there's got to be something. I don't know.
Well, we've researched this in the past. This is probably the 10th time someone has spoken up at council And we've researched it and written opinion letters and then reinforced the opinion letters and so forth. The law provides that railroads are governed by the federal government and the Federal Rail Transport Agency. And because of the Interstate Commerce Clause of the U.S. Constitution, no political subdivision, county, state, village, municipal corporation such as Lordstown can regulate that. So we can't pass ordinances, we can't cite them. And that's not an answer that should be acceptable, but that is the answer. Now you're saying, what can you do? That train services someone that's not the federal government. I don't know if it's General Motors, I don't know if it's Taylor Steel, I don't know who it is. But I would think that they need to know this. And I think every time there is a blockage, I think as many residents as possible should render a complaint. Now, talking about General Motors in this village, I realize
I don't want to go there.
yes, I mean, we're talking about killing the goose that lays the golden egg. And but as a practical matter, they need to know every time there's a blockage. I mean, and you can be very diplomatic in the way you can, I'm assuming you can be, that in registering a complaint, but documenting it. And then the first thing someone's going to say is, well, how often does this happen? And I imagine the chief has records, do you?
I'm sure we could provide those
Right.
if needed.
But that's, as a practical matter, that's all you can do. We've called out news media, we've had press conferences, I mean, we've tried to embarrass, engage in moral suasion. But the guys running those trains, they're paid by the hour, and they're doing their job. And you're not talking to an executive, you're not talking to a lawyer there, you're talking to, and they've been told, ignore, maybe not ignore, but they don't have any jurisdiction over you. And we even issued a citation to Bob Hagan. Remember
We did.
Bob Hagan?
Yes.
Okay, state senator, and he worked on the railroads on the weekends once a month, and we cited him and tried to bring him into Newton Falls Municipal Court, and he just sort of laughed at us. So, but that's the answer, unfortunately.
Is there anything about the length of these trains? Because they have really extended, they used to be 70s, 50s to 80 or something like that, but now these 150 length ones, and I think that's where some of the problem is right now, because they're making them so long.
No question. It's like the triple trailers, and the state of Ohio has finally cracked down on the triple trailers. Maybe another avenue is to encourage some legislation on the federal level that you can't have a train more than so many cars within the same community. I mean, maybe Tim Ryan and the state and the U.S. senators, that might be an approach there. That might get someone's attention,
If you would call Tim Ryan's office, and it's in the book in downtown Warren, his district manager, his name's Rick Leonard. And I've had a lot of dialogue with Rick Leonard on this specific issue. I've also had dialogue over at the General Motors plant with Tom Mock. Everybody's aware of this problem, but we're all stymied, Donna. We'd love to get it corrected. We don't know what to do.
Mayor, if I may, we recently met over at the other crossing that we seem to have more of a problem with, at Muth and Springs. And I know the mayor was there, and so was Mr. Reeder and Dale Grimm, and a number of us were there, fire chief, assistant fire chief. And there was representatives from the railroad there, and they shared with us some information that shocked me. They said that they actually have crossings in the state of Ohio that they block for days. Days. So what I took out of that was, if they're not addressing that, do you think they care about us for hours?
His response, whenever he was discussing that, his response was an hour or 2 hours, you do not have an issue in Lordstown, was their exact response.
And the thing is, they will come and move, and they will be within 50 foot of the roadway to the end of that train. and they just sit. They disconnected and actually pulled away. That's what they told us. And they said it sat for 3 days. It's one of these little spurs, and and it was a country road, and people had to go all the way around. And he said there's nothing you can do about it. And it's not right. We agree with that. But if you want to give Tim Ryan's office a call, ask for Rick Leonard, and, you know, explain it to him, and he'll tell you probably the same thing we're telling you here right now.
Oh, I know, it's just,
It's a shame.
it's frustrating. Thursdays, the 2 engines, that's all that was over the, over the road.
Oh,
Everything else was back. Just 2 engines. They wouldn't have it.
We have the same thing down here. And the thing is, you have school buses would sit there, the kids would come in late.
School bus was up there for an hour and a half. Community bus was up there for an hour and a half, just sitting there. These kids are on the bus, and their parents probably don't know where they are, and they're sitting up on island.
Well, we've written tickets over the last many years, and they all got thrown out. Am I correct, Brent?
Well, initially, they got fined pretty heavily. But then when they produced that case law that said that we're not permitted to cite anymore, that's when everything went south.
Okay.